what happened to King Solomon next? How did he die?
Yeah, before we come to the death of Solomon, I have to, in fact, to talk about Moses, you see. Because, you see, although according to the Bible, chronology, Moses was living about 400 years before Solomon. The Bible makes Moses comes first, and then 400 years later, Solomon comes in Jerusalem. However, if we look at the story of Manetho, the Egyptian priest and historian who lived in the 3rd century BC, and mentioned, it was not written, he wrote the history of Egypt in the different dynasties of the history of Egypt in his book known as Egyptologist for Philadelphia's to be placed in the Alexandrian Library. However, he also mentioned, because at the time the Library of Alexandria already had a Greek translation about the first 5 books of the Torah, of the Old Testament, the books of Moses. So the story of the Bible, the story of Moses, Joseph, and those people was already known in Egypt and Alexandria during the 3rd century BC. So in fact, Manetho said, because when Moses, in history, when the character of Moses, when he died, when he disappeared, the Egyptian record was completely forbidden to write anything about him. No mention of Moses or the character of Moses in Egyptian history is allowed. However, in these cases, when the authorities suppress some information, it goes on in a popular kind of stories. And Manetho, the historian, recorded this story about Moses, the popular story he had during his time about Moses. He said that Moses was an Egyptian, and that Moses lived during the time of Amenhotep III. So Amenhotep III, as you know, I have identified him as the king of peace, Solomon.
Yes.
You see. So Solomon was contemporary, according to Manetho, was Moses. And in fact, the historical records, archaeology and history, confirm this fact, that Moses was a contemporary, not only was a contemporary of Solomon, Moses was the son of Solomon.
The son of Solomon?
Yes. I tell you what happened.
What is your proof?
I tell you what happened. Amenhotep III, as we know, married the daughter of Uya, whom I identified as Joseph of the Bible. So this marriage made a kind of a union between the two branches of the descendants of David, Thutmose III. The branch coming from Sarah, the Hebrew lady, Hebrew wife, and the branch coming from his Egyptian wife. Amenhotep III, Solomon, came from the Egyptian wife, a great grandson, and Joseph from Sarah line, and the daughter of Joseph, the daughter Queen Tai, Amenhotep III married Tai, uniting the two branches of the descendants of Thutmose III, David of the Bible. The fruit of that was Akhenaton, became known as Akhenaton.
Moses.
I came to identify really Akhenaton and Moses as the same person. Not only because of the similarity.
What is your proof again?
Not only because of the similarities between the religious beliefs, because Moses, from biblical side, is known to be the first one to claim that God, the unity of God is one. Abraham, the Hebrew, did not do that. Abraham and all the other patriarchs before Moses regarded that the Israelites have one God. The Israelite tribe, the Hebrew tribe, has one God. But they didn't mind, or they believed, and they allowed that other tribes would have other gods. So it's one God for them. But they accepted and agreed that other tribes have. But Moses came to say that, there's only universal God for everybody. One God for everybody. It's not for each tribe there's a different God. And this is the first time, this is a monotheistic religion. It could not have happened really in Canaan, or it could not have happened anywhere other than in Egypt. I tell you why. Because you see, the idea of a ruler and the idea of a god were associated in ancient times. So because the Egyptians believed that the god of Egypt, Amun or Ra, was the god of Egypt, the two lands of Egypt, and he owns the land of Egypt. The God owns the land of Egypt, and only the son of God would be allowed to sit on the throne of Amun or the throne of Ra. And that's why they have a ritual of the birth of the holy birth. We have it in the Luxor temple and the Hatshepsut temple. We see how before going to his wife, after marriage, the king is purified by the priest in the holy water, and then he has to be going through different rituals, be anointed by different kind of perfumes and so on, and then the priest would make a kind of a ritual asking the spirit of Amun to come and dwell in the body of the king. And when they see a sign of this happening, the king is allowed to go to bed with his wife, and in this case the child will be the son of God spiritually and the son of the king of the pharaoh physically. This is the holy birth of the king. So Egypt was thought to belong to Amun at that time, in the 18th dynasty. However, when the empire started, when Moses III extended the borders and made a large empire between the river Euphrates in northern Syria and northern Sudan in the south, in northern Khartoum, the theologically and philosophically the question arises. If Pharaoh was ruling Egypt because he is the son of God of Egypt, in whose name is he ruling the countries of the north and the countries of the south? This was a question, was not answered. And then it was Akhenaten, you see, who Akhenaten brought two things from history, from the Bible, Moses. From history, only we know of Akhenaten as a monotheistic king who, claimed that only one God which have no physical image, no statue, no picture for his God. He's called in Aton. In Hebrew becomes Adonai, Aton. And this also again, here, okay, he's God now. He said that Aton is the God not only of Egypt, but in the countries of the north and in the countries of the south. A universal God. This idea the first time, because to have a God for all countries, not for one tribe or one country. This could not have happened before the empire, before the extending, because the idea, the concept of a god followed the concept of a ruler, of a king. When the borders of Egypt expanded outside the borders, empire, large empire, then the idea of a universal God appeared for the first time, and that's why it was at that time. However, it is not only the idea of one God with no image for all of Egypt, it is also see the birth of Moses. Yes, he supported the birth of Moses is, I mean, his mother gave birth to him, and they say that at the time Pharaoh, who was decided to kill all the children, fearing the Israelite child who will threaten his throne. So he decided to, I mean, this is the idea, and he ordered the killing of the Israelite.
This is the birth of Moses.
In the Bible, yes. They say that Pharaoh ordered the midwives to see if a Hebrew woman gives a birth to a boy, to kill the boy, if it's a girl, to leave. And this is the biblical story. In the case of Akhenaten, we see that, I mean, Queen Ty gave birth to a child before Akhenaten, from Amenhotep III. His name was Thutmose. When he reached the age of 5, his father appointed him as the heir apparent. I mean, he will come to give him the title to follow him on the throne. However, the priests of Amun rejected that because Ty was not the heiress. Yeah, as I told you during the ritual of, before the, which the king has to go through before going to his wife, Amun has to come to dwell in the body of the king before going to his wife. They believed that if his wife was not the heiress, that means the daughter of the previous pharaoh, his sister, then the spirit of Amun will not come in this case. So Amenhotep III had many wives.
Yes.
Had many wives and about 300 harem in his harem. And some of them got children, but they are not, they have no right to the throne because they are not born from the heiress. Only the child born from the heiress has the right to follow his father.
Only from Queen Ty.
From his sister Queen Sitamon, because Queen Ty was not the heiress. His father was a Hebrew, Israelite. So her son would not have a chance, according to Egyptian tradition, to follow his. So as soon as the king, decided to appoint the boy disappeared mysteriously. Obviously, we can see how the priest managed to get rid of him somehow. So when, after a few years later, in about year 11 of his rule, Amenhotep III, Queen Ty was about to give birth to another child. Obviously, the king did not want to have another conflict with his priest who killed his earlier son. So we can understand, we don't have historical evidence, but we can understand how he would ask, he would ask the midwife to kill the child if he was a boy, in order to avoid conflict with the priesthood. And Akhenaten was born, obviously, from Queen Ty inside the royal palace. He had, since his early years, we have a very strange title he had, he who lived long. I mean, I don't know why while he was a child, he adopted this title. It means that was a threat on his life, indicate there was early threat on his life, and he passed that threat, and he lived longer than. So he had that. And also, again, that his mother kept him away in near the eastern delta, near the northern delta, where the land of Goshen, where the Israelites were allowed to live, near her father's family, the Israelites. Kept him until he became 16. He did not come to the royal palace in Thebes, in western Thebes, before he was 16. Yeah, because she feared on his life. And then again, when he made his first temple for Aten, within the Karnak temple, he made his statues, he has 4 statues in front of, in the form of Osiris. Osiris means the death king, and he was still alive. So there are many indications to show that he was supposed to die at his birth, and he survived.
That's why Akhenaten was different, and he had problem with the priest because of his story. They killed his brother.
Not that only, not only that, but because there was they challenged his right to the throne. They said again that he was not the son of Amun, because his mother was not the heiress, so he has not the right to the throne. And he had to marry Nefertiti, his sister, half sister from Sitamon. She was born. The Queen Sitamon,
the sister of King Solomon, or
who he married his sister Sitamon, and brought Nefertiti, and Nefertiti became the heiress. Only when Akhenaten was allowed to marry his half sister, he was allowed to the throne. And even then, the priest did not allow him. So he, this is the idea. They told him, "You are not the legitimate son of our god Ammon." So being rejected as not being the legitimate son because of Ammon. And with this concept, it is a unique time in history, really, that a person, a man, an intelligent man, come to the idea of, originally from the time of the building of the pyramids, Egyptians believed that the human being has 2 dimensions, one is spiritual and one physical, and the spirit leaves the body at the time of death, and it might come back again for resurrection. But here he came to widen this concept. It is not only, he regarded not only the human individual who has 2 dimensions, physical and spiritual, he regarded the whole universe, the whole cosmos, also as having a spiritual dimension, which he called Aten. Aten is not the sun. Sun is Ra, and sun god is Ra. Aten is the power, the heat, the energy coming from the sun and giving life
from the sun
to human. Yeah. And this is the first intellectual. As Henry Priestley, the American Egyptologist, said, this is the first individual in human history. He used his mind rather than his tradition, because he was never taught in the temple as the other Egyptian princes. He was living alone in near Goshen with the Israelites and so on. And he came to this complete unique idea for the first time, that there is a universal God. In fact, without this, Plato would not have been able to identify a physical universe and a spiritual universe. In philosophy and in theology and in philosophy, this is a unique point in the history of mankind, to realize, one person only realize, that the whole cosmos has a spiritual dimension unseen detect it, you can sense it, you can feel it, you can recognize it, but you can't see it. It was Akhenaten at this time.
And Akhenaten spoke to God as well?
Obviously, yes. He always, in his prayers, he has in the tomb of one of his followers in Amarna, he had all the hymn written by him to the God. I mean, identifying him as a unique one God, and who shines with his.
He used to speak to God, but in history he used to worship with Nefertiti the sun.
Not the sun, no. I mean, his temple had no roof.
Okay.
Egyptian temple has roof, but in darkness. But his temple has no roof because of the light, not of the sun. He did not worship the sun. You can see the beams. The symbol of his God is beams of light coming from the sun and giving ankh, the life, to the nostrils of the individual, to people. So it's not the sun. It is the atom. Is the energy. Really, modern times they call it energy. This is exactly what he meant. Is not the sun. The sun in Egyptian as a god called Ra. Now, when they said you are not a legitimate son of Amun, he told them, okay, but Amun is not the legitimate god. Aton is the universal god, and he challenged the priesthood, and he built a temple within the Karnak temple, a small temple for Aton, and he forbade the priests and anybody else to enter unless he denounced the other gods. He only believed in one God. So they threatened him, and they threatened his father, and his father had to ask him to leave the city of Thebes, and he went halfway between.
So his father was alive.
His father was still alive. His father, because his mother was afraid that if his father died, the priesthood would not allow him to succeed his father. So his mother called him when he was 16 years old to come to, and so he can marry Nefertiti and be a co-regent to rule together with his father. He ruled for about 5 years with his father, but he had to go to leave Thebes, and he went to Amarna, halfway between Cairo and Luxor, and he built his own city of Akhetaton, Amarna, for his own god. I forgot to tell you about Sigmund Freud, because Freud he pointed the way for me to look in this way, really. Yes. Freud, who was a Jew, but a liberal Jew, and he has his own mind again, like Akhenaten, he believed that the Israelite religion was an Egyptian religion, and when he thought his daughter Anne was visiting after Tutankhamun's tomb was discovered. She visited Egypt, and she went to Amarna and this area, and he was very interested for her letters to him. He wanted, and she even sent him some small items, archaeological items from there, which is found in his in Freud's museum in London now, in Hampstead. He was very interested in the story of Akhenaten at that time. And he came to say, because in the Jewish tradition there is a kind of the confession, Adonai Elohina, Adonai Ahad.
So he said Elohim. Who said Elohim? Called God?
No, this is the biblical confession of the Jews when they confess their loyalty to God. They say Adonai Elohina, Adonai Ahad. And he said this is exactly, they say Aton Ilah, our God, is one God, because the Egyptian T becomes a D in Hebrew. Yes, the Egyptian T becomes a D in Hebrew. Aton is Adon. So Adonai is our Lord, you see.
So this is the similarity Sigmund
Not
Freud
only
said.
that, but also, I come to another point here. Let us first carry on with Freud, because Freud concluded that the Egyptian, the Israelite God, not the Hebrew God, the Israelite God was an Egyptian God. However, Egyptian deities, Egyptian religion is known to have different deities. So how come? So he recognized, before he died, in his last book he wrote, Moses and Monotheism, in London in 1939. Moses and Monotheism. He identified the religion of Moses, this one God, as being the religious of Akhenaten, but because at the time he thought that Akhenaten died early, he thought that one follower of Akhenaten took the religion of Akhenaten and gave it to the Israelites. However, we come back after 5 years of the co-regent, Amenhotep III, Solomon died in Thebes. So Akhenaten, and here we have another explanation which you could not understand before, that Solomon, although he believed in one God, he also believed in other deities. We know that Amenhotep III, he believed in Ammon and other Egyptian deities. However, when Akhenaten introduced his Aten, one God, he believed in that as well, and we have evidence of that.
King Solomon.
So Solomon, the idea
evidence?
of Solomon believed in one God at the same time as believing in other gods cannot happen. It did not happen in history except in the time of Amenhotep III. And here we find that Amenhotep III, that Akhenaten was contemporary of Hermes Trismegistus, of Amenhotep, son of Habu, and it was Amenhotep, son of Habu, who advised Amenhotep, King Amenhotep, about this new Israelite thing. And he committed suicide because of what happened to them, and they were going to punish them and so on. So he was, the contemporary of Moses, son of Habu, and Hermes, in fact, is confirmed in this way with Solomon.
Son of Habu, so he knew Moses or Akhenaten.
He knew him very well. He knew him very well.
So they were at the same time.
He was a contemporary of him. And this again confirms that son of Habu and Hermes Trismegistus are one and the same, because we have a tradition also that Hermes Trismegistus was contemporary of Moses, you see. And see, we here come to a point when Akhenaten was ruling on his own, and he will not allow any other god to be worshipped in Egypt after the death of his father. So he closed all the temples. He had a special unit of the army formed of foreign troops, and he sent it to all the temples. He sacked all the priesthood. He closed all the temples, and only Aten should be worshipped. In this case, it was difficult for ordinary people, Egyptians, to understand this abstract concept of a God they cannot see, with a priesthood that did not exist. No mediation, no priesthood, no rituals at the temple. This was too much difficult. Nobody, any few people followed him, you see. So eventually, at the end of the day, we have the army. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you. the army, with the help of the priesthood, made a coup d'etat against him, and they forced him to abdicate the throne for Tutankhamun. And then, as I believe, he went to Sarabit al-Khadim in Sinai, near St. Catherine, temple of Sarabit al-Khadim, and he lived there until he came for the Exodus. We will talk about that next time. However, before we
finish, please, another important question. How old was Moses, or Akhenaten, as you said? How old was he when son of Hapo, or here we'd like to remind people who didn't see the part of son of Hapo as the same person of Hiram Abif. So how old?
He was about 30 years.
30 years. So he knew him very well.
Yeah, he knew him very well, yeah. He knew him personally.
Okay.
Because he warned the king about what will happen.
They had to... What was the influence between?
He was, Akhenaten at the time was living in the royal palace, and son of Habu was in the royal palace every day to meet the king. I mean, they knew each other, not only lived at the same time.
And Hiram Abif, or son of Habu, worship Atun.
No, son of Habu did not worship Atun. No, son of Habu worshipped the other, Amun. Amun, the other god. Son of Habu, I mean, the development of the idea of son of Habu comes later. I will tell you later when we come to, after the death of Akhenaten, what happened, because the whole thing went through son of Habu. But the whole thing was kept within the cult of son of Habu. But this is going to be later, because I have to tell you later about what happened to Akhenaten, Moses, and the Exodus, and then we come back at son of Habu with the next time.
So we promise them. So you tell them the story in the next part.
Son of Habu, from now on, son of Habu lived. I mean, the whole story lived to create Christianity at the beginning of the 1st century AD through the cult of son of Habu. Son of Habu is the backbone of the whole biblical account from then onwards. But before that, I would like to tell you something. You see, the Bible, obviously, the Old Testament, the Torah, does not say that Moses was a king. We know Akhenaten was a king. However, the Talmud, I mean, which has another. I mean, they sometimes say things that are not told in. They come from the old tradition as well. I mean, but they are not part of the Bible in some cases. They disagree with the Bible in some. So they say that Moses, because they say that Moses found an Egyptian soldier fighting with a Hebrew. And then, he killed the Hebrew. So he killed, and Moses was afraid and ran away, and he went to Sinai. This is the biblical story. But the Talmud tells us a different story completely. They say when Moses escaped from Thebes, he did not go to Sinai, he went to Upper Egypt. He went to Upper Egypt. Upper Egypt with the Karnak and Upper Egypt, Aswan, Karnak, and this area, and there he met the queen, and the queen name, her husband died. The queen named Adun, which is the name of his god, and he married the queen. He married the queen who had a son. Yeah, and he ruled this kingdom in southern Egypt for 9 years before he had to abdicate his throne and go to Sinai. So, in fact, what happened to Akhenaten, as I think, is the same thing that happened to, the Talmud is telling more or less, he was a king for some time, and then he was forced to abdicate the throne to the son of his queen, and he went to Sinai, you see. Also, before we finish today, I have to tell you that the idea of the abdication of the power is historically recorded, you see, because in Saqqara, which is the tomb of Memphis, where many ministers and nobles are buried, a French archaeologist found the tomb of the nurse, the wet nurse of Tutankhamun, and he found in the tomb the scene that this lady Maya sitting on a seat, and on her lap sits Tutankhamun as a young boy. He was 9 years old when he came to the throne, sitting on her lap with his crown on his head. He is already, his early time on the throne. Behind the scene of this scene, there are 5 figures drawn, pictures of 5 figures of his ministry, the ministry of the king. 4 of them were generals of the army. The minister of finance was civilian, but the other 5 were generals of the army. The ministry of Tutankhamun was composed of ministers, and 3 of them followed Tutankhamun on the throne. General Horemheb, and General Ramses. Okay. This is straight evidence that the ministry of Tutankhamun was composed of army officers who all followed Tutankhamun on the throne. It means indicate that he came to the throne as a result of a coup d'etat against Akhenaten because of his religion. And then obviously we will know later how things changed. But before that, next time we'll talk about the Exodus, the Israelite Exodus from Egypt.
Here I would like to remind people, Ahmed Osman has 7 books published, Moses and Akhenaten. If they need more details, so they can get Moses and Akhenaten, Christianity and Ancient Egyptian Religion, The Hebrew Pharaohs of Egypt, The Lost City of Exodus, Jesus in the House of Pharaohs, The Soul of Ancient Egypt, Breaking the Mirror of Heaven, and his new book, The Egyptian Origins of King David and Temple of Solomon, is now pre-selling on Amazon. Thank you very much, Ahmed Osman, and thank you very much for watching us, and please do not forget to press like and subscribe. Thank you.
Thank you.